Excuse me, do you know why we pulled you over today? Exactly, it's because you're not subscribed. So you better fix that right now, or we're gonna have to take you in. You didn't see the MaxTech video? Question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark. I like probably. I'm not sure which one you mean. I don't know. Like, I wish I knew which one you meant. I don't know. I literally do not know. Anyways, if you can drop me a link to that video, I will be forever grateful. Does anyone have the link, or should we just move on? Finally, dude. Let's keep it pumping, boys. Let's keep it pumping.
Has revealed and released their new MacBook Pros with the M1 Pro and M1 Max chips, we can finally get a better idea of what to expect from the future Apple Silicon Mac Pro. So in this video, I'm going to take the existing leaks and rumors that we already have for this Mac Pro and combine them with what we know about the M1 Max chip to make some predictions in terms of the general size and design of the Mac Pro, the price, the release date, the layout of the motherboard, the situation with the RAM, the overall performance, and much more. So let's jump right in. First of all, Mark Gurman recently reminded us that the Mac Pro will have a new larger SoC chip with up to 40 CPU cores and 128 GPU cores, which is a perfectly scaled version of the current 10-core M1 Max chip with a 32-core GPU. And in previous reports, Mark confirmed that the 40-core chip will consist of 32 high-performance cores, exactly 4 times the amount that you get with the M1 Max chip. And he also said that it would come with a less expensive option with a 20-core CPU and a 64-core GPU, which is 2 times the amount of the M1 Max. So just like I already showed you guys around 4 months ago, I believe that Apple will quite literally take 2 or 4 M1 Max dies and toss them into a single SoC package using some form of new Infinity fabric to interconnect the dies to create a single extremely powerful chip. But before I get into what that means for the price and the performance, I want to cover the design. But first, I want to mention that only a...
But first, I love MaxTech, dude. Like, this guy has been pumping out a lot of content, so let's not clown on him. I just thought it was funny. A lot of but firsts and a lot of before. Anyways, let's keep it pumping.
Around 27% of you guys are subscribed. So if you didn't already, click that subscribe button below to help us reach our goal of 1 million subs before the end of the year. Now, getting into the design, a lot of people are expecting the new Mac Pro to look like a cube, but that's actually based on a pretty old rumor from Mark Gurman from way back in January when he said it would resemble the old Apple Power Mac G4 Cube. But if you look at a more recent report from Gurman in May, he changed his mind and he now believes that it'll look like a smaller version of the current Mac Pro design, which to me makes the most sense because the current design of the Mac Pro is now iconic. So here's an image of what I expect it to look like, being around 33% smaller than the current model. Now you might be wondering how Apple is gonna have enough room for all of the components if they're making it that much smaller. Well, if you think about it, there are 4 different things that take up the most amount of space inside of the current Mac Pro. Number 1 is the 2 massive MPX modules for graphics. Number 2 is the huge CPU heatsink for that crazy power-hungry 28-core Xeon CPU. Number 3 is the large and thick triple fan system that covers the entire face of the front of the Mac Pro. And number 4 is the pretty hefty 1.4 kilowatt power supply. So to tackle number 1 first, I fully believe that the new Mac Pro will not support the current MPX modules because I can 100% guarantee you that third-party GPUs...
I think that's a little bit, well, third-party GPUs, yeah. But I hope Apple would still make some expendable eGPUs or HGPUs. The eGPUs will probably be in the external displays. Some like modules that you can put in there. Probably not MPX modules or third-party modules, but something that you can put in there to expand the GPU capacity, right? The graphical performance.
like the ones from AMD, will not be supported on the new Mac Pro or any Apple Silicon Mac ever. So with that said, the new Mac Pro will likely only have 4 or 6 PCI Express slots so that professionals can add in things like audio interface cards, I/O cards, Blackmagic Deck Link cards, and potentially custom Apple GPU cards if Apple decides.
There it is, dude. There it is.
To make them. But even if they do, they will no longer be double wide cards like the current MPX slots. They'll probably only take up a single slot, just like the current Afterburner card. Now,
there must always be a GPU card in a desktop computer, right? Come on.
On to number 2, that massive CPU heatsink may not need to be that large anymore because, as we all know, Apple's chips are extremely power efficient. And that same reasoning applies to the huge triple fan system, which I believe can be easily slimmed down on the new Mac Pro. And finally, for number 4, we have the absolutely overkill 1.4 kilowatt power supply that we will no longer need. And I know this for a fact because the highest package power reported on the new M1 Max MacBook Pro has been 92 watts total. And keep in mind, that's with Andre from Inantec putting as much load as possible on the chip, including the CPU and the GPU at the same time. So if you multiply that by 4, assuming the Mac Pro will have 4 of these M1 Max dies, that brings the power usage up to 368 watts. And that's for the top of the line chip. Now,
that is literally not even as much as is it like, no, it's almost as much as one graphics card, like a 3090 or 3080 or whatever. Insane, like an actual card, not the chip inside a laptop, right? Come on.
Keep in mind that our 12-core Xeon Mac Pro, which is slower than the 30-watt CPU,
Intel has always taken too much space. Yeah, true, very true. But also like the MPX cards, right, and graphics cards in general, it's just too much space.
And the M1 Pro chip was able to use up to 218 watts by itself. Let me repeat that. That's just the Xeon CPU alone. Jesus. The 92-watt total package power in the M1 Max also includes the GPU, the neural engine, the media encoders,
there it is,
the Thunderbolt display
there
engines,
it is.
the AMX coprocessors, the
LOL, waste of space. Yeah. Yeah, waste of space, but hey, it kept you warm during the winter. I'm just saying. Now I have like a heater right next to me, feet. While I obviously have all sorts of heaters right here. Well, I'm half Brazilian. Cut me some slack there.
Memory buses, the unified RAM, all of the different caches, and literally everything else. But then taking it even further with the current Mac Pro, the highest end W6900X GPU uses around 300 to 350 watts alone. And then the W6800X Duo likely uses up to 500 watts total. That's more than the theoretical maximum of 368 watts for the 4 M1 Max.
Like, isn't it mental that we just accept it? That was just our lives. Like, I'm just gonna say it. This little heater that I have right here is an oil heater, right? It's something that you put as an add-on in your house to warm up your feet or whatever. This thing uses about 800 watts. So you're going to tell me that my computer was basically using half of that just to be a computer? Holy shit, dude. Like, this MacBook Pro with the same power as almost like every modern, let's say, laptop, is literally not even using maybe 10%. Insane.
And that's including the CPU and everything else. So the point that I'm making is that Apple no longer needs a crazy large power supply.
Oh, hell yeah,
especially since they won't support AMD graphics cards anymore. So with that design stuff out of the way, I want to get into how I can see Apple pulling off this new 40-core M1 Max Quadro chip, which is a name that many other people on Twitter can agree on. As we already know, Apple is using a binning process to improve yields for their chips, as you can see in this analysis by Frederick Orange on Twitter. So for example, if there are too many defects on the bottom M1 Max portion of the die, Apple literally slices off the bottom and uses it as an M1 Pro chip. Or if there are up to 2 defective performance cores on the top, Apple sells it as an 8-core base M1 Pro chip in the base 14-inch model. And even better, Apple secretly printed a second neural engine on the bottom M1 Max portion just in case the one on the top is defective, to then sell it as an M1 Max chip to improve yields, which is genius.
It is genius, and this is what I'm talking about. Like, at the helm of Apple, you have the master of supply chain. This guy knows how to get through every single war on chips. Like, he knows how to get there. He knows it. And he's just, I'm not saying this is a relaxed time to beat Tim Cook, because it probably never was, but I'm just saying he is in his element right now. Like, people are, like, his competitors are fighting him on his turf this time. And I'm not saying that he's not an expert on any other thing that he has, involved himself with, but he is the expert of the experts here. He's the wizard of the experts here. He is, like, you're not gonna beat him at this game. And look at this dude. Look at how insane this is. I think it's literally insane. M1 Max QUADRO poggers? Yeah, poggers.
So my theory is that over the next year, Apple is gonna be collecting perfect M1 Max dies with no flaws at all, so they can be put together in the Mac Pro by creating that M1 Max QUADRO chip by using a larger I/O die for connecting them in some sort of infinity fabric to minimize efficiency loss. And the cool thing about using perfect M1 Max dies is that Apple can technically enable the second 16-core neural engine within each die, giving us up to an insane 128-core neural engine across all of the 4 M1 Max dies if they really wanted to. But to make things even better, the new M1 Max QUADRO chip will technically have 8 video encoders and decoders, as well as 8 ProRes encoders and decoders. So for example, Matthew Moniz made a video where he compared the M1 Max MacBook Pro to a custom-built desktop PC with the brand new i9-12900K Alder Lake CPU and an RTX 3080 desktop GPU.
Wow, those two will give him a very, very, very warm winter, I can tell you that.
And in his DaVinci Resolve export test, the MacBook Pro smoked the desktop PC by finishing in just 1 minute and 59 seconds. But with 8 video encoders and decoders, the M1 Max QUADRO and the future Mac Pro would finish the export in only around 30 seconds, basically being 6 times faster than this RTX 3080 desktop PC, which basically will create the world's fastest computer for video editing by far. But what really blew my mind is a programming test that Matthew ran, which was compiling Mozilla Firefox. Apparently, the 10-core M1 Max chip only took 1 minute longer than the Alder Lake 12900K, which is absolutely mind-blowing because that CPU is now the world's fastest non-server consumer CPU in terms of raw performance, being over 2 times faster than the M1 Max. But in this compile test, the M1 Max is barely slower because of the efficient unified memory architecture. In fact, in our Xcode programming test, the 10-core M1 Max was only 4 seconds slower than the insanely expensive 28-core Xeon in the current Mac Pro. So imagine how fast the 40-core M1 Max QUADRO will be in a future Mac Pro. And just to use some quick math, the 40-core CPU could score up to 49,348 points in Cinebench R23 if it scaled linearly. But just in case, I'm gonna take off 10% for efficiency loss, giving us a score of 44,400 points.
Dead. Sorry, dead. Intel, sorry, it's done. Holy shit.
Basically creating the world's fastest non-server grade CPU, competing with some of the highest end AMD Threadripper CPUs out there. But going even further,
fuck me.
The crazy thing is that the new M1 Max QUADRO chip will also have 8 AMX chips for matrix multiplication. It's gonna have 128 channel memory for overkill photo editing performance, and it should have 16 Thunderbolt 4 controllers to support up to a theoretical total of 12 6K displays and 4 4K displays using HDMI. And then
Dead.
Of course, you'll have
Holy
up to
shit.
256 gigs of unified memory and 128 powerful GPU cores. So if you're curious about how that crazy GPU would perform, we can actually get a rough estimate if we take a look at the performance of the M1 Max. In the optimized 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme benchmark, the 32-core M1 Max scored almost exactly 4 times higher than the 8-core GPU in the M1, showing that Apple achieved perfect 4 times scaling in optimized workflows. So if we assume perfect 4 times scaling going from a single 32-core M1 Max die up to 128 cores in an M1 Max Quadro chip,
No. No. He's lying. This is a lie. Someone check the maths. Someone check the maths. He's lying. Holy fucking shit. Insane. This is insane.
that would bring the score up to over 80,000, which is absolutely insane. But just to be realistic, let's factor in 10% efficiency loss due to the
Max? Am I living in a parallel universe right here?
fact that the 4 dies will have to communicate over some form of infinity fabric. That brings us down to around 73,000 points, which is actually higher than the best score ever recorded in this 3D Mark Wildlife benchmark, which is 61,973 using an i9-10900K and an RTX 3090 GPU. However,
that was a score for a fucking GPU, dude. I have never seen this score. For a fucking RTX 3090. What 3090 is this, fam? This is like the 3090 Ti that they didn't release yet. What the hell? I've never seen this score. Shit! I'm getting hyped. That is unreal? Yeah, it is unreal. Rise of the Planet of the Apple Silicon. What? Rise of the Planet of Apple Silicon? What are you talking about? Tim Cook. Apple Silicon. Together. Strong. Oh, it's this. I'm sorry. I don't know what I'm doing. Anyways, holy shit, this is insane, dude. But this number, I've never seen a number like that on the 3090, and I've checked because yes, your boy was thinking about buying a 3090, okay? He was thinking about it. The reason why is because I was just like, well, maybe I should, right? Instead of the PlayStation 5 that I have, maybe I should. And then I went for the PlayStation 5. I mean, I would have done it even with this score, but I didn't find this score back then. Jesus, flying fuck.
An RTX 3090 GPU. However, that GPU was overclocked like crazy.
I'm just not gonna say anything.
With the clock speed sitting at 2.8 gigahertz compared to the base 1.4 gig frequency. I
really should stop talking and let Max do the talking, because I just went on a rant for a few minutes, wasting your guys' time. For no reason. So I just want to formally apologize for that.
A slightly overclocked memory speed as well. But if we adjust the boost clock speeds down to a more realistic 1.8 gigahertz that most of these 3090s ship with, we see scores of around 45,000 points compared to an estimated 73,000 for the future Mac Pro. So the point that I'm making is that even the integrated 128-core GPU in this new M1 Max Quadro Mac Pro would be the fastest consumer GPU in the world.
Mental.
And that's not even looking into performance per watt metrics.
And that's not even, so you would be able to just put another, well, allegedly, right? We don't know. But I would say in a desktop computer, you would be able to just put another GPU card, let's say a repurposed M1 Max, right? You put another M1 Max in there, but then they just disable the CPU cores and just put everything as a GPU core. Scheisse. Scheisse.
So based on that, I honestly don't think that Apple needs to create custom Apple GPU add-in cards. But if for some reason they do,
I should really shut the fuck up. I should really shut the fuck up and let Max do the talking. Max, I'm sorry, I'm just too excited. You make me excited, Max. And that came out wrong. Or did it?
they can potentially reuse M1 Max dies that had too many flaws in other parts of the die and simply use them to create custom GPU chips with disabled CPU cores. But with all of that,
I'm living in a parallel universe. This is the Matrix. I'm in the Matrix right now. This is literally what I just said. Fucking love this guy.
out of the way, the last point that I want to make is that a fully loaded new Mac Pro will be less expensive than the current ones. So getting into it, the reason that the current 28-core Xeon CPU in the Mac Pro is insanely expensive is because it features a massive monolithic die that has low yields because those huge dies take up a larger portion of the silicon wafer, so you're wasting more of the edges of the wafer and losing dies due to flaws. But if you look at something like Apple's M1 chip, the price per die is much cheaper because they're much smaller, estimated by Locuza on Twitter to be 120 square millimeters, so there's a lot less wasted wafer space. So Frederick Orange on Twitter made an estimate of the price per die, and it comes out to $200 per M1 Max die based on a 60% yield rate because this is a newly designed chip, bringing the total up to $800 for 4 of these dies, which is likely much lower than one of those monolithic 28-core Xeon dies, which doesn't even include all of the other components like the crazy 128-core GPU and everything else. So because Apple is going to be combining multiple M1 Max dies, they're saving a ton of cash compared to using monolithic dies, which means that the price that we as consumers have to pay will drop by a lot. But
I mean, yeah, if they are, I mean, usually what Apple does, right? I'm just gonna say it, right? And I know this is an argument that a lot of Apple haters use, is Apple doesn't really put lower prices on their products. What they tend to do, and what a lot of Apple haters do not really see, is they tend to just put extra features into the device to not necessarily make it cheaper, right? Of course, they just see that they have budget to space out, and they would just say, okay, well, we put a bunch of extra features in, so we know we're serving people a brand new, better product than we put before, right? Because if they would just replace the chip, then probably they could have served it or sold it cheaper. But I would say Apple's probably going to come out with other stuff that they're going to put into this new Mac Pro, and which is eventually going to bring up the price again. But I don't know, maybe Max has a theory that is better than that. But I in my experience, Apple doesn't really lower their prices too much with Max. But yeah, I don't know. Let's see. Oh, what the hell?
With that said, let's finally get into what I expect Apple to pack into the base model, as well as the pricing and the release date. Mark Gurman believes that you'll have two main chip options for the Mac Pro. The 20-core model, which I think will be called the M1 Max Duo, and the 40-core model, or the M1 Max QUADRO. So for the base model, I expect it to come with a 20-core CPU, a binned 48-core GPU that can be upgraded to 64 cores, 64 gigs of unified memory that can be upgraded to 128 gigs,
Jesus
and
Christ.
a 1 terabyte SSD that can be upgraded up to 16 terabytes, and potentially optional dedicated traditional RAM if they choose to add that in for specific workloads. And as for my estimates for
Some
the
people
base
need it, right?
price,
I mean,
I
I'm
think
saying.
it'll start anywhere from $4,000 to $6,000. And then upgrading from the base chip to the top of the line 40-core chip with 128 GPU cores and 256 gigs of RAM will cost somewhere around $8,000 for that crazy upgrade, which is significantly cheaper than the CPU and GPU upgrades on the current Mac Pro. And then,
shit.
of course, you've got to add in storage upgrades and potentially traditional RAM upgrades, and maybe even add in custom GPU cards if Apple decides to go that route as well. But of course, this is all just speculation, but one thing I do know for sure is that the new Mac Pro will likely go up for sale in either November or December of next year, just in time for business
Yeah, I think
write-off
that's-
season.
I think
So
that's
there you guys go. Hopefully I was able to put some things into perspective, and I want to
Yeah.
mention that I fully believe
For sure.
that this Apple Silicon Mac Pro will be the fastest consumer available computer in the world by far for both.
Mental. Blows my mind. These numbers blow my mind. I don't know what I'm doing. Anyways.
Professional work and gaming, basically giving you a supercomputer at home. So hopefully you enjoyed this
doing this
video,
live.
and if you did, go ahead and click the circle button to subscribe. Definitely check out one of those two videos right over there. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.
In the next awesome. This is like I love his videos, dude. This is great. Like Renee and MaxTech, if you ever want to have really great explainer videos, these two are literally the best. I'm just gonna say literally the best in the business. So I really love that. I really love that. Thank you so much for sending me this link. We have one more article to go, and then we're going to shut it down. What is this? React content? Yay. Yeah, I mean, you know what? Fuck you, okay? Fuck you. I still like the Tim Cook, Apple Silicon together, strong. What the hell? Intel dead. Yeah, Intel is dead. It's just done. If I look at these numbers, it's done. LMAO, Intel died quite a few times in this video. Yeah, they did. They did. I mean, they're also working on their own GPUs, right? So, I mean, crazy shit. Yeah, because they suck dick. Exactly. They do. They suck dick. Especially their marketing department. That is like, bleh. Ew. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, let's put on some music again. And let's do this last article. Because my throat is tired.